Welcome, everyone, to the Dad Cartel podcast. I'm excited to bring you conversations with great dads from across the country. Please follow Dad Cartel on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. And if you found value in this episode, and please share it with other dads who may find it helpful as well to help create a great dad culture. And if you're interested in participating as a guest, please email me at prouddad@dadcartel.com, or you can just reach out to me on one of the social platforms. Today, we're lucky enough to be joined by Mike Medina, a United States Marine that served for 10 years in 5 combat tours. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. It's timely. We're recording this on Memorial Day, and this couldn't have worked out any better to have a Marine on here. Tell me about just kickstarting. What was your dad origin story, and if you can even, I don't know how that coincides with you in the Marines, or if that does, but if you can just explain that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I really, I really hold myself to a military standard, right? Since I got out of the military, especially, and I think that I was able to take a lot of those leadership traits, a lot of the discipline, the attention to detail, and I was able to apply it in my everyday life, but more importantly, in my household, in front of my kids, to set the example for them to emulate.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So what were your expectations before you were a dad, and then when you became a dad? How were those different?
I found that I was in situations with both of my parents where there was so much of me to learn about what not to do. And that was kind of how I grew up. I had a stepfather come into my life who really taught me what it's like to love someone's child that doesn't even belong to you. And I learned a lot from that. And he was very tough on me, very disciplined on me. But that ultimately paved the road that I walked on to carry myself as the father that I am now. And by no means am I saying I'm the best father, right? But I learned a lot of good characteristics from that individual. And then once I had children, it was just an ultimate culture shock of like, wow, I'm here now.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's feedback that I'm constantly getting from guests that the term stepfather, step parent, right? And some take it in a direction where they say, it's almost like not insulting, but the term's a little weird, because when you step into that role of parent, you're taking, if you assume it properly, you're diving into all the responsibility that comes with it, right? And I say it a lot. You can learn from basically anyone on how to be a dad, right? You can pick a role model, and if it's a good person, then you could pick something up from them. And so it's powerful to hear that so many people are, learning from individuals that may not be their biological father, but they see them in that dad type of role.
Yeah, absolutely. My current relationship that I'm in, I have 2 stepchildren, and I use that word very loosely because I always say one of the greatest compliments I get is people are like, "Oh, I would never know that those were your stepkids," And to me,
Yeah.
like as a stepdad, that's the ultimate compliment that I can get because they see the love and affection that I have with all of my children, but they see the discipline that I have with all of my children, and I'm not lighter on one than I am the other. Everybody gets equal and fair treatment.
Yeah, and that's a slippery slope sometimes too, right? I've heard that from men that are stepdads. They say, sometimes the discipline portion can be the trickiest, right? Because they may not feel empowered by their partner to discipline them in the way that they see fit, right? And tell me about that. How was that for you, and what advice would you give to dads that may struggle with that?
So honestly, I really helped set the relationship up for success prior to getting into that role because I needed to lay the expectation down immediately that, hey, I understand that these kids have their father. I respect their father. I give their father as many kudos and invites and everything that I can, have great communication with them. But at the end of the day, I'm ultimately the man of the household, right? And so I need to be able to treat all the kids the same, and that comes in multiple ways. Like, you can't just call me when it's time to discipline them because then you look like the enemy all the time, right? But it also comes with enforcing the mother, enforcing the your relationship partner in the relationship. And then I think that kids naturally gravitate towards discipline.
Yeah.
And I think that I was able to bring that in my specific relationship at an enhanced level because of the leadership that I gained in the military. So it wasn't just discipline my way or the highway, right? It was teaching, mentoring, and coaching. But the kids also saw that there was involvement from me that they didn't necessarily see everywhere. And so I think that you just have to be the father that you always wanted, and
Mhm.
reach out and do those extra things and go the extra mile.
Yeah. Tell me about that. I completely agree with you. I think that everyone would benefit from discipline, right? One way or another. Tell me about why it's so important for kids, right? We see the examples of kids running around stores and kids that swear at their parents, and we know the implications of just unchecked, bad behavior and where that can lead, either, in a coffin or in a jail cell. But from your perspective, why do you think discipline is so important?
Well, there's no secret that that's what the Marine Corps is, right? It's
Mm,
the attention to detail and the ruthless adherence to discipline, right?
yeah.
And I saw that groom my own success, and I wanted to implement that in my children. And I
Mm,
think it comes down to a couple things, right? I think discipline is, my kids see me get up at 5 in the morning and you go to the gym,
mhm,
right? So they see that discipline, but they also see the immediate on spot correction at their deficiencies, right? So
mm,
they see that level of discipline. They see me coming home and sometimes I got to work till 1 in the morning. They see that discipline. So they know that they need to do that in their academics. And the number one way to implement discipline is to have it within yourself. And I think that that is the ultimate tool that you can give your kids. I remember to this day, between my father and my stepfather, my father was up at 4 in the morning and he was in the gym every single day. It just naturally came to me that that's how I need to conduct business in my life, right? I
mhm,
saw my stepfather work with his bare hands and build a living for us, working nothing but blue collar work outdoors in the fields, doing anything that he needed to do. And without him even needing to say anything, I saw that. Right. So I
mm,
make sure that my kids see that from me. Like, I love you. I'm glad you had a great day. Daddy has to take care of himself. Right. Because
mhm.
I'm going to put my best foot forward at being the father when I do so.
Yeah, it's the thing that's constantly spoken about, but I don't think it's emphasized enough that kids really they see the example and they see everything that you're doing, and that's what they're picking up more than your words, right? They'll see you waking up early, they'll see how you treat your spouse, they'll see how you treat, the waiter or waitress at a restaurant, and that's the behavior that they pick up, right? It's those little subtle things that people may overlook that think are insignificant, but they may be the most powerful thing for a kid. And for their development. So yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think that's so important, and it's not emphasized enough, in my opinion.
Yeah. One of the things that you just said really resonates with me, and it's how you treat your significant other. Right. So
Yeah,
um, I think that between a blended family of sons and daughters, right? For the daughters, it's my I would say opportunity to show them the example of what a man is supposed to be in their life, and they see that by the way that I treat their mother, right? And
yeah,
so I have children with another woman also, and those children, when they come in from California, they see that the relationship between their mother and I is great. We're not in nasty court battles. We're not in any of this other stuff. I handle my business like I'm supposed to as a father and as a man, and we have a great relationship, right? And then
yeah,
for my sons, right, stepsons and myself, um, they get to see that work ethic that I put in, right? But they also see their mother getting flowers on a random Tuesday, not just
yeah,
on Valentine's Day. They don't see me calling her derogatory names, even if
mhm,
it's just playing around. They don't see
mhm,
none of that in the household. And
mhm.
and that sets the example for them to walk upon also.
Yeah, it's giving them really strong baseline, right? Of like, here's the standard, and you can only go up from here. And I think
Absolutely.
that's important to set that, right? Like nothing below this is acceptable. You can only improve on this, right? And I think that goes such a long way, man. That's awesome to hear. Um, a lot is talked about with dads about financial contributions, right? And I think that's a huge part of it, right? Being able to provide as a man, it's an inherent feeling, I'd say. I think you would agree with that. And
Absolutely.
you know, what what do you think is another big contribution that we can make as dads that's non-financial?
The number one to me is time.
Mm,
A perfect example of this, I had a stepson who was playing football here in North Texas. And I had a project that I was on in New Orleans, right? So it's about a 7 hour drive. I stayed up all night to drive it back because I've just never missed a game, right? I've never missed a
yeah.
game. I've never missed a practice. I've never missed a school event. And so
Mhm,
I drove all the way back just to be back in North Texas at 8 o'clock at night for his game, just to drive
mhm.
all the way back to be in New Orleans because I had a project I needed to be on at 5 a.m.
Oh
So,
man.
I did a 14-hour round trip drive for a 2 hour event. but it was one of those things where I called his name from the football stands, and just the way he turned around and smiled at me,
Yeah.
but just it let me know like I was doing the right thing.
That's beautiful, man. And it's time well invested, right? Again, looking at it as a resource, we all have finite resources. Everyone has a certain amount of resources, and time is one of those that you can't really replenish. But that's why it's so important to allocate it where it matters, right? It's not sitting on the couch scrolling through our phones or watching YouTube videos all the time. It's if that time is better spent with your kids, which I would argue it always is. It's better to allocate it there, right? As dads, we kind of have to make that sacrifice of, I may want to watch this fight, or whatever it is, the sporting event, the football game, or whatever it is, but that time is better well spent when it's actually contributing to your family and to the development of your kids.
Yeah, and I think that one of the tips that I always recommend to other people is, I just so happen to be a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, right? So
Oh
my
man, that's
daughter
awesome.
is, yeah, thank you, man. My daughter is lethal on the jiu-jitsu mats, but like
Yeah,
that's like that's like unintentional time giving, because it
yeah,
just flows so organically, right? We
yeah,
have to be at practice together. We
yeah,
have to be cutting weight together. We're competing
yeah,
together. So it's like I'm still taking care of myself, because we ultimately owe time to ourselves also, right?
yeah,
But it's like I'm sharing that with my daughter, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
another one is, my son, he's 17, and he's into football. He's into high school football, and in Texas, it's not even really a religion. It's kind of like a cult, right? So
yeah.
he's out there lifting weights with me every single day. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter what day it is. He's always down to pick up the iron with me, and
Yeah,
that's time for myself, but I'm still giving it to him, and it just flows so organically.
yeah. It's finding a way to harmonize it, right? I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu actually, so I train also.
Nice.
Yeah, so I can relate. I'm out here in Arizona. I train with Aries, and man, I can't tell you how much. We could probably do a whole podcast about this, I'm sure, but the how much martial arts has changed my life and given me discipline in a different way, where it just it's structured me and given me a lot of things on just how to. Sorry, I got some weird feedback. Can you hear that?
No, I don't hear nothing.
Give me 1 second. I don't know if it's me. I think it is.
I used to be affiliated with Aries.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hold on. I think I'm still getting feedback when I hear you talk. Let me just double check my mics. Let's see. Can you say something? See if it comes through clear.
Can you hear me better now?
1 second. It's, it's weird. Let's see. Can you try that?
Can you hear me better now?
All right. I'm gonna try these speakers. Am I okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's see. All right. I think we'll try it this way. I think it might be something with my mic and the headphones. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Let's see. Just make sure this is all the way up. All right. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, so I've learned. I feel like I've learned so much from jujitsu, and it's given me so much that I can take away. And the beautiful part, I think, more than anything, is when I go early and I'll see the kids class right before the adults class, and I'll see the parents that are there and they train and their kids train, and you see them so excited and they have something that they can bond with, right? And it's this common love for martial arts. Do tell me a little bit more about that. What did it do for your daughter? You said you trained with her, and how has that changed her, and how are you guys, besides like the competition piece? So how do you guys like geek out? Do you guys watch instructionals at home, or watch like, highlights or anything like that?
Yeah, so one of her favorite, she loves to compete, but it didn't always begin that way, right? So when I met these two with their mother, there wasn't very much athletic bones in their body, right? It was very much like, I like the iPad, I like the Xbox, and all that really went out the window once I came involved. And so with her, when she would come to the jujitsu class, she was just like, and it started before jujitsu, she was just like what I like to call my battle buddy. She was everywhere with me. She wanted to be at Home Depot, she wanted to be in the garage, she wanted to be on the motorcycle, whatever it
Nice.
was. But when we got to jujitsu, she was super nervous. And I think it was the fact that I was there with her. I was always in her corner. I was willing to coach her. And it eventually progressed to, kids class every day. And now it's her decision. She's training 4 hours a day on Monday and Thursday, and 3 hours a
Oh
day
man.
on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And she's competing all over the state of Texas. She's competing in Florida this year. She's competing at Vegas this year. And now when we come back from even her professional super fights, to where she just made like $400 in commission on ticket sales because her whole family wanted to come see her compete. And she gets to pick her walkout music and all that. Like, all that's bonding because I'm there with her the entire way. And her and I have developed just such an amazing relationship, to where she's honestly like one of my best friends. And it's so hard because like I am the parent, so she can't be my best friend, but she's just everywhere with me. I love her so much. And one of her favorite things to do is when she's done competing, we come back and I screen mirror to my phone to our big TV in the living room, and we go over every single little detail. She tells me what she did wrong, what she wants to do better. And what I love about her is she knows that whether she wins or lose, she's in practice the next day.
Yeah, that's so important, right? The lesson of winning and losing, and how really in the grand scheme of things it doesn't matter, right? It's the takeaways of, self-improvement. What can you do better? What can you change? And having those honest conversations with yourself, right? Did you give it your all? Did you, was the result of this competition exactly what you deserve, right? Did you get what you deserve every single time, right? And did you put in all that you could, right? And even if you did, sometimes it's not enough, right? Could you have gone even further? So, that's the type of self-realizations I've had when I've competed, and even, having those like really tough training sessions. You're just like, I need time to assess how did I do everything that I possibly could have. And I think that's so important for kids, man.
Right. And my greatest memory with her, I'll never forget it. And this isn't a knock on anybody, right? It's just the way the situation happened. We had went into a fight camp where she was training multiple times a day over the weekend and everything. She was cutting weight. And for an 11-year-old to be cutting weight is just crazy. But even when she's 2 pounds, she's like, no, I'm going to cut the weight. I'm going to make it. So she'll get out there, and she competed in her first tournament, and she ended up taking silver, and she won her first match. And she ran and jumped off the mat with her whole family there on her father's side, her dad there, her mom there, everybody. She jumped into my arms first and just started crying, and like, I love that mom and dad are there to support also, but I love that she, like, in her mind, I didn't have to say anything to her. She's like, you're here on the grind with me. Like, I really appreciate you too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful moment, man. I bought my daughter's only 10 weeks old right now, but I bought her a gi, like, I think it was, I don't know, 6 months before she was even born, and I'm like, she's gonna
Right.
start training as soon as she can.
Yeah.
And
It's
I'm like,
amazing
she's
for
a
kids.
it is, man. It is. It's a beautiful thing. And football, same thing. You mentioned with your son. That's such a tough sport, man. I shied away from it, I think, in high school because of all the injuries, and I saw how bad that could have been. But something about me was always like, I love that competitiveness, right? I've always had that. And I don't think there's a game that is more competitive than football, right? Just grinding it out, and just so physical and intense, right? So that's awesome that your son's involved with that. And I'm sure there's a ton of lessons there on the football field, in the same way that in martial arts that you get, right? Just perseverance and self-improvement and grinding it out. So, I think sports are so big for kids, man. It's you keep hearing it, and it's like they need something besides their parents telling them what to do, right? Sometimes it's that coach that just pushes them to this next level, and another person that can help kind of guide them in a very positive direction.
Absolutely. And, football to me is the ultimate team sport. Um, it's, some of these coaches, when you put your kids in, and like for the parents out there, you put your kid in your random football league and stuff, but like there's select football leagues, there's private football leagues where these coaches are getting paid big money to come in. And I'll never forget two stories for you. I grew up in Hawaii, and we were playing a cross island team, one of our big rivals, and we were winning like 40-0 at halftime. And I'll never forget, our coach came in and he was so mad. He was like, if they had one good athlete on that team, they'd be beating you right now. And I'm like, we're up 40-0, but it was that just the attention to detail, to not drop your pack, to finish the fight to the end, strive for perfection even though it's unobtainable. Like that's what football taught me growing up playing football. And I played since I was probably in the fourth grade all the way up through high school. And then my brother grew up in Florida, and his coach was a prior NFL player. And I'll never forget, they played a private school, and the physical abuse they put on these kids was insane, right? But I'll never forget, they won like 27-3, something like that. It was just a complete domination, and their coach made them run sprints on the other team's football field for letting them score 3 points. And it's the little things like that I mean, these are life lessons that people are learning, and one of the things that troubled me with youth sports, which is why I kind of pulled my daughter out of the soccer league she was in, she got out there, they didn't win a single game, and they still made it to the playoffs, and they lost in the playoffs. And the coach was like, we had a great season, and I'm glad you guys had so much fun. And, I looked at her mom, and this was my first year as the stepdad, right? I looked at her mom and I said, we will never come back here again, because the standards that I hold my kids to is just way superior than what this is. And so now they're only in the best sports leagues, they're in the best schools, they're in the best everything. And I do that because it's kind of like how I do business, right? I'm elevating the bottom line, right? So if the bare minimum in the school is C's and D's will graduate, my kids will never even see their cell phone again if they're not making A's and B's, right?
Yeah.
Like everything is earned, nothing's given. And it's unfortunate because I'll call the school because, my son has a B in chemistry and he has a missing assignment. And I'm like, I'm trying to figure out where he's deficient at. And she's like, well, he's not, he has a B. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. We have a different standard here, right? We have a standard of excellence in everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's this, we're in a time where, like what you're mentioning, there's so many like participation trophies and, pats on the back for beating mediocre, even for being mediocre or worse, right? And it's a time when people that are striving for excellence are looked at as crazy, right? And there used to be a time that people that had that high standard were celebrated, but it's like there's such a big movement the other way, and it's because so many people shy away from taking that hard route of pursuing excellence and getting up early, working late, right? It's looked at as like, oh, well, you're just neglecting your family, your friends, or you're neglecting so and so. And there can be balance, right? There can be a way to integrate it all. And I think balance is a weird word to say, but it's more finding a way to integrate it all together, right? Like what you mentioned, spending time with your kids in things that you mutually like, right? Martial
Right.
arts, football, going to the gym, going hiking, whatever it may be, right? Fishing, but finding a way to weave that all together and then push for excellence, right? And it's achievable. It's the harder route, and it's people shy away from it so often.
Yeah, and I found it to be that way a lot easier with my biological kids than my step kids, because um I don't really know a better way to say it, so I'll just say it, right? It's like I try to right the wrongs that have been done, and not saying their parents were wrong at all. It's just that, if I hold a different standard, one of the things that I told their mom was, you love me for the man I am. I'm hardworking, I'm driven, I have goals. Sleep is the last thing that I'm concerned about in my life, right? I tried to finish my master's degree, like everything that I was doing. And I said, if you love that about me, let me implement that into our children. And the ultimate success to the way that those two, right, my quote unquote stepkids have turned out, was mom sat back and let me lead. And I don't think a lot of step parents get that, right? But I was fortunate enough to get one of the ones who was like, listen, this guy's doing the right things, he's hanging around the right people, he has the right group of friends, I'm going to let him take lead of this. And it's truly benefited them to this day.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful, right? There's such power in being confident enough to step back too, I think, right? And it's looked at sometimes as if a parent, we take a back seat to things that may not be our strong suit, that it's a weakness. But I think it's actually a strength, right? When you're confident enough to say, you know what, I'm not best suited for this. Let me lean on my partner for this. That's powerful, man. When it goes back to, even into martial arts, when you're the guy that can, diffuse the situation and just say, you know what, if this person's running their mouth, let them run their mouth. If they invade my space, that's a whole different thing. I'll walk away from this fight, right? There's so much power in that, where you just say, I don't care, right? Like it's fine. I'm
Right.
confident enough that I can just ease this conversation, or I can just diffuse it, and not create something that shouldn't happen, right? And I
Right.
think I think you're right. I think as parents, we need to know when it's time to step up and to lean into our strong suits, and when it's time to take that back seat.
Yeah, and it's not always the popular role, right? And there's so many scenarios with sports, life, and school where I've had to be the driving factor, right? And you'd be surprised, or maybe you actually won't be surprised, but the amount of parents that look at me like, you're too rough, you're too tough, why don't you lean back? And I'm like, no, like I owe it to these kids to hold a level of consistency. And another story, my daughter was in a soccer game, and this was her second or third season. They were getting ready to go to overtime, and it was tied 3-3, and I saw her walking on the field, right? And so I'm on the sideline with the parents, and all the other kids go to the coach, and I just point my finger at her and I tell her to come here. And I told her, I said, if you walk another second in this game, we're going to run our tails off after this game. You and me, we're just going to run. I'm going to run the laziness out of you. Right. And I said, so you get out there and you make sure you take this game over. Right. I'm getting chills telling you this, such a true story. I said, you take this game
That's
over and
awesome.
you don't let this go away. She got out there and the girl took the ball and went all the way down the field and almost scored. And my daughter stole the ball from her with like 14 seconds left, drove it all the way down the field and scored the game winning goal. And all these parents who were just like, I
Beautiful.
used some colorful language in my conversation with her, right? And these parents were like, I can't believe you're like that. They were just giving me the weird parent look, right? So then my daughter scores the winning goal and I just look at them and shake my head and like, there's a standard here, right? So it's not always the most popular role.
Yeah, yeah, no, and you know what? It's taking whenever taking that hard path, it never is the most popular, right? You're never gonna get like the pats on the back. I think it's the pats on the back come afterwards, like you said, right? When the parents notice that, like, oh wow, you really lit a fire under her, right? But in the moment, they're probably looking at you, like you said, like, oh, this guy's one of those parents, he yells at his kids or whatever it is, right? But they don't understand that sometimes that hard path is necessary, right? It always is necessary. I think I talk about it like some of the most successful people I've ever come across put themselves in situations of adversity, right? And usually it's controlled adversity if possible, right? Martial arts is great for that. Sports are great for that. Lifting weights, anything physical, and both either anything difficult, either physically or mentally, is so beneficial, man, because it just improves us, I think, more and more. And you can't improve unless you're faced with challenges. And I think it's more so for kids, right? As adults, it's great, but I think it starts as kids.
Absolutely. And I think that us as parents need to be the catalyst that drives that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So tell me about who served as a dad role model for you. Was it your own dad? Was it a stepdad? Was it a neighbor? Was it who was that role model for you?
So I really had two, right? I had my father and my stepfather, and man, they were both tough on me, right? They were both very tough on me. My dad, very successful in his career post Navy, right? Very successful in the world of government defense and things that he was doing. And then on my stepfather's side, he was very much like the blue collar guy, owned his own landscaping business, would build fences from sun up to sundown. And I remember, being split between homes. It was like, man, like I really, like, looking back on it now, I really got the best of both worlds, right? Because my stepdad would just come in and wake me up at 3 a.m. and we were putting barbed wire fences up around a 10-acre, ranch in Arkansas. And then the other side of me, my dad, I always tell people all the time, they're like, growing up in Hawaii must have been so fun. I was like, yeah, I guess. But, when my dad took me to the beach, we were diving out, to where it's 15, 20 feet deep. And he'd be like, dive down and grab that rock and let's see if you can walk it all the way back up to the top, So it was like almost like Navy SEAL training, as a teenager. There was no shortcuts. I could tell you that. I was never allowed to shortcut anything in life. And as much as I hated that process when I was a kid, I'm so thankful for it today because I truly believe that it's what my success lies upon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and that's so powerful again to get the different perspectives, right? And it could be your own dad, your stepdad, right? Neighbors. For me, it was a lot of that, right? My own dad taught me the value of hard work too. He was a carpenter, grew up, started working when he was probably like as soon as he could walk. They're probably having him sell bread in Mexico and that type of thing. And he would tell me those stories, right? And to his credit, he never wanted that for me and my brother, right? He said, I suffered so that you guys won't have to, right? And
Right.
hopefully we improve, every generation improves. And, but he would take us to work with him, right? We'd go, he'd do roofing jobs and he'd say, hey, come help me, come pick up the trash and I'll give you, some kind of money at the end. But, I'm 5 years old helping him like install a door and handing him screwdrivers and things like that. And,
Right.
10 years old, helping him a little bit more and so and so. And doing moving jobs when I'm older. So, once you start seeing that and it becomes part of your, when you're so young and you already start working hard, it's nothing by the time I got my first official job at Target when I was 16 and I'm like, oh, this is really easy. Like
Yeah.
I'm not picking heavy stuff up. I'm not moving furniture or anything like that. Right. So, it just fortifies you more, I think. And by the time you start facing these adversities, you can see the difference of someone who went through something like that and started working hard when they were kids and had parents that worked hard compared to the kids that never faced any of that, right? They're lost and they're confused and they don't know what to do when they may get fired or for whatever reason, right? Or when those trials and tribulations come up, they're like deer in the headlights. And I think there's so much to that parents can in a very controlled way, I'd say, prepare their kids for all the adversity and all the bullshit of life, honestly.
Yeah. I tell my kids all the time, right? I don't want your first taste of adversity to be when you leave this house. I want it to be here, right? I want to see how you respond here. And I want to start working on those characteristic traits here. And
Mhm.
and I believe what you're saying, it can be at a controlled expense. And I couldn't agree with you more. And it's something that I try to do for my kids all the time, whether it's putting my daughter competing, she's competing in an advanced league, right? Versus an intermediate league where she belongs, or if she has to go up a weight class, she does that. And my son in football too, the same thing, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that there's tools that we can utilize to help implement that. And, one of the things that you said was, your father lived a hard life, so you didn't have to. And I really appreciate and respect, dads like that. The only thing that I caution is, I truly believe in that quote, that says tough times create,
Yeah,
weak men and all, it starts to flip flop in generations. And so,
yeah,
I make great money. I can provide a great life. We can do multiple vacations a year. But at the same time, like I want to be cautious because I want my kids to leave here with
yeah,
calluses on their mind and on their body
yeah,
to prepare them
yep,
for the real world because we're in a soft generation. And I think that the tougher that
absolutely.
our kids can be when they get out into the real world, it's going to be one of the things that propels them to success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on, right? It's making sure that they still have those challenges because otherwise, it just becomes this nightmare where, again, kind of back to that same point where when those trials and tribulations come up, when that adversity shows up, then it's just a nightmare, man. Some people just fold so quickly and you're like, you need resiliency. I tell people, when in my professional role, one of the main things that I look for is someone who's adaptable. You can learn, you're willing to learn, you're naturally curious. And the other thing is resiliency, right? You can see the people that will, if something doesn't go their way, whether they'll be able to troubleshoot it and figure it out, or the people that will just panic and fold, right? And you never want to be the latter, right? You want to be the
Right.
former. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we can control that in our own households on a day-to-day
Mm.
basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have a daughter, you have a son. what's the difference in between parenting a girl and a boy? And I know this is a dramatic difference, but to you, what's the biggest takeaway, from being the girl dad to being, the boy dad?
Yeah, it's tough because you want to say like I hold my kids to the same standard, right? But the outcome in which I'm grooming them for is completely different, right? So for my sons, it's very much hard work, discipline, attention to detail, right? And it's the smallest things, but it's all the time. I'm so consistent with it. It's, hey, I'm going to leave today. I'm going to be gone for 2 hours. I need X, Y, and Z done. And when I come home, the first thing I do is make sure they're done. And if it's not, I'm correcting your deficiency immediately. Right. And then for my daughters, it's more about presenting yourself, you know, adequately amongst the world where maybe that's missing now, right? So it's just little things like, how little girls are. Sometimes they'll sit there and, if they got one leg on the couch, one leg on the floor, I'm like, hey, close that up. What are you doing? That's not happening right now, right? And it's even to the way they dress. Like I make sure like there's a standard that they have to uphold also. And it's just so different because their outcomes are so different and what you're looking for, right? But to say that I'm more gentler on one than the other, I would say that's probably not gender specific as much as it's age specific, right? So my 2-year-old Abram, he's a nightmare, man. Like he is everything that I deserve as a dad because he's just
Yeah.
balls to the wall, 100 miles an hour, right? And when he gets upset or versus like our 17-year-old, I come down on them a little bit differently about like crying for no reason and things like that, right? Like, things are worth your time, things are worth your energy, things are not. So like I have different conversations with the age group more than I do the
Yeah.
gender group.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you mentioned, when it comes to girls, and I say this because I have a daughter, right? Something that's always come across my mind, and I go from she's a baby now to I think when she's going to be a teenager, which is terrifying for me. But I start thinking
Right.
about,
Yeah.
there's such a weird like expectation on girls and women, right? Especially like the beauty standard of like you need to be this perfect. It shifts, right? In the 90s, it was like this slender woman, big boobs, the voluptuous hair, this type of thing, right? Then it becomes more like now it's translated to like a big voluptuous woman with, women are going to like Brazil and like God knows where, Mexico, to get like injections in their butt and things like that.
Right.
And it's crazy, like changing beauty standard. And you're seeing so many crazy implications to it, like where girls and women are mutilating almost their bodies, and you hear these crazy horror stories. And it's tricky, like how in your mind, how do you navigate those conversations? A lot of it has to do with, and I don't know how old your daughter is and if she's kind of at that point or if that's crossed your mind yet, but how would you navigate those conversations when it has to do with these crazy ever changing beauty standards?
So one of the first things that I look for is who's in their friend group, right? I
Yeah.
look at the caliber of individuals that they're hanging out with, and I base that off their parents, right? So like my kids can't just go spend the night at anybody's house, right? Like I need to make
Yeah.
sure that their parents' values match mine. And that's why my world is so small. I have jujitsu and military friends that we're friends with, and that's really it. Like we don't
Yeah.
hang out with nobody from their school. So that's one of the big telling signs is like how does that friend group act? And for my son, he's 17, and I'm like, are any of your other 17-year-old friends talking about what they're going to do with their life? And he goes, no, not really. I was like, then
Yeah.
you need to find different friends, right?
Absolutely.
And I set the example for him because we just opened up our own construction company, our commercial roofing company, and my friends are CEOs, good husbands,
Yeah.
good fathers, right? And so
Mhm.
they see that my circle really helps dictates the trajectory that I'm going, and their circles
Yeah.
can do the same thing.
Right.
So that's one way. And another big way, which I catch a lot of heat for it too, even from family members, I'm very big on the cell phone usage that I allow you to have. Like, it's a privilege, it's not a right. You don't just rate an iPhone 14 Pro, at your age group. So you take your phone to and from school. When you come home, it's on the counter. You're not touching it again, right? Because it's not for your entertainment. There's no social media for kids in my household. I don't let them get on that. We're not watching, I'm sure they're great people, right? But we're not watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and we're not doing none of that. We
Yeah.
rule all of that out.
Yeah.
Video game plays very minimum in the house. I mean, we're very much like, down to our roots. And
Yeah.
so I think that's not going to shelter everything, but it's going to almost put them on a higher curve by
Mhm.
allowing it to come into their life later when they're ready.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as I think about it more and more, some of those things are they're so detrimental, I think, to kids, right? Like video games is one. It can, it's fine, I think, in very small doses. I personally like don't play them at all because I have this thing where if I play them, I'll just want to it's probably the competitiveness where I'll just want to beat the game that same night. And I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
have time for any of that. So I've weaved that out completely. But the other thing you mentioned that I think is really important, the social media thing, right? It's when you're a kid, all the way up until even like a teenager, right? You're so impressionable, and you don't really understand that, social media is all this posturing game, right? Most of the time, it's these people that are presenting this lifestyle and this situation that's not really reality, right? These people that say they have this luxury home or they're always on vacation and all these types of things. It's most of the time it's posturing, and even if it's not, that's not real life, right? And I think it's so important to either limit it or just remove it, like you have, until they get to a certain age, because you don't want them to think that's what life is like, right? And I think that opens up the opportunity for bullying, for all sorts of really kind of nasty things. And I don't understand why, I think it's important to limit that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My daughters all being between the ages of 9 and 10 and 11, right? Some of the things that they tell me, like, oh, my friend, said her friend said this on Snapchat. I'm like, you could kiss Snapchat goodbye. You could just wave bye to Instagram. Like, you will not
Yeah.
have any of this stuff. And I'm a little old fashioned, and it's hard because you'll hear me talk about being a stepfather a lot, right? Because that's where a lot of my time is, because
Yeah.
they're the ones in my house on a day-to-day basis. But it's even like when I take my stepkids over to their family's house, and 8-year-olds have cell phones and they're walking around looking down all
Oh
day and
man.
not talking to nobody and AirPods in. And I'm the first person in front of a house of 30 people where people, barely knew me, who I was in the first year, because we moved away, right? So I come around,
Mhm.
and I just say something like, hey, go put your plate to the sink. And they're like, hold on a second. I'm like, no, I don't think so. You don't tell me to hold on. You go take that plate, you put it in the sink. And
Yeah.
the family looks like, oh my God, right? And then they're like, when is
Yeah.
she getting a cell phone? I'm like, she's not. Like, this
Yeah.
isn't a debate we're having right now,
Yeah.
right? Or can she have Instagram so we can all be friends? Negative, not happening,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
like, and so it hurts their feelings in the beginning, but then as life starts to unfold, I'm like, look at how some of these other people are acting, right? Look at what they're
Yeah.
doing in your life, but look at you, look what you're doing. You're doing all these things because you don't have those distractions.
Yeah. Yeah. You're reading books, you're spending time with your family, you're having conversations, you're spending time just sitting there and thinking, right? I think that's lost, right? The you and I are probably definitely one of the last generations that we actually were bored, right? We sat there and we
Yeah,
had time to be bored. And that boredom is, man, I can't tell you how much that's fueled my creativity, where you figure out ways to entertain yourself and you think of new ideas and you see the world in a different perspective. And I catch myself too, man. You're probably the same, where sometimes you're like, why am I on my phone so damn much? And I'll just go for a walk or go for a run, go train,
yeah.
go do whatever, but it's like pulling yourself away. And I think, you probably see it a lot more because I haven't been around parents too long yet, but those parents that are just on, they tell their kids one thing, right? Again, it's leading by example. They tell their kids, get off your phone. And then as soon as their kids walk away, they're on their phone, right? And then they're just staring at it. So it all roads lead back to the parents and what they do. And that's what it seems like.
Yeah, one of the things that we do is like a perfect example for my son. He's 17. He wants to put a little money in his pocket, and I said, "Sure, I'll give you an audio book or a regular book every month. And I'll give you $50 when you read it and you tell me all about it." So his first
Yeah.
ones is the first David Goggins book, and I'm like,
Oh,
"Man, what a great book for a 17-year
oh
old boy
yeah.
to listen to." And while my neighbor's kid is worrying about what filter they're going to put on their Instagram page,
Yeah.
my son's reading Jocko Willink, or my son's reading
Yeah.
David Goggins and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's just I just wish sometimes these parents could get a clue. Like, we owe
Yeah.
so much to these kids, and so much of it goes to the wayside because you're like, here, just take the iPad, or here, go do this. And it blows me away. Some of the problems that I hear, like my kids tell me, like their friends are having at school and things like that. I'm like, we just don't have those here.
Yeah, you mentioned David Goggins' book, man. I can't tell you how powerful that was for me, and how I was able to relate to a lot of things that he said in that book. But again, one of those big advocates of calcifying the mind, right, and putting yourself in adversity, and just showing you that, no matter what circumstance you came from, you can be a success if you will yourself through it, right? And it's so powerful to teach those lessons to, kids that, our problems are always going to be different, right? Like it's always like it's all perspective, right? Like the biggest problem that our kids may face may seem insignificant to us, but it's the most, important thing to them. But it's showing them that, you can weather this storm, right? You can figure it out a way to get out of this situation, and it's gonna get better, but you need to persevere through it.
Right. And it's unfortunate that I have to tell you this, but I catch a lot more shit for it than I do praise from other parents.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I
and
bet.
it's so sad because I'm like, I'm not running some like boot camp over here.
Yeah.
It's so important for me to drive home to the fact to my kids that everything that you want in life has to be earned. I'm going to give you nothing. Right. And especially when it comes to, my daughter. I mean, my kids have their own bank accounts, debit cards. At any given time, sometimes they have $400, $500, $600, $700 in it from saving their money. Right. But I'll go ahead and get your haircut every 2 weeks for you. But you want something special, you're covering that. Right. And however long it
Yeah.
takes you to save, that's where you're going. And it
Yeah.
teaches them so many things about life. And one of the things that, my 17-year-old wants to do is he's like, well, why can't I be like my friends and their parents just give them a car? I was like, that is not happening.
Yeah.
Could I go buy you a car today? 100%. But I told
Yeah.
you when you were 15, every single dollar you save on your 17th birthday, I'll match you, and I'll
Yeah.
pay for whatever vehicle you want under that price. All I require you to do is cover the insurance and the
Mhm.
gas. And if I'm asking
Yep.
you to take your siblings to school, I'll cover the gas for you. Right. But it
Mhm.
gave them a goal. I set up a plan for them to do it, and they didn't make it. And the best thing that I can do as a parent when they don't make it is hold them accountable to it. So now he's
Yep.
a 17-year-old on the school bus every day. And that
Yeah.
was ultimately a decision that he made.
Yeah. That accountability piece, man, is so important. And it's you found a way to support him, right? Of the dollar match, right? That's powerful because I don't know, you probably grew up like I did where I wasn't getting a match, right? We had to figure it out. And
Right.
it's helping them in a controlled way, but also still teaching them that lesson, right? Of if you want something, you have to work for it, and it's going to cost you, and it's gonna hurt. It's gonna be tough. You're gonna have to make sacrifices, but that's life, right? That's life as an adult, and you get it in a taste in that sense of like it's almost like bumper bowling, right? Where the bumpers are up, and you may not hit the strike, but it's going to be a lot easier to get to that path. But it's still going to teach you something, and bumpers are probably a little it's probably a bad analogy, but it's a controlled setting, and I think that's important, right? And accountability is a big piece of it, right? You didn't do it, sorry, you don't get it, right? Same thing,
Yeah.
like
And that's where a lot of parents struggle, right? It's like, but they were so close. So my kids are not allowed to make less than a B in the house, right? And if you go below at 80% in any subject, your phone's gone for the entire semester. One
Oh man.
chance you
Yeah.
got, right? And they'll come home and it's a 79.9. And I'm like, but that's not an 80. Let me see that phone. Right? And it's gone. They'll
Yep.
never touch it again. And I'll pay
Yeah.
for it and not even care, because the message
Yeah.
that I'm giving to them is, now you go 9 weeks without it because I just needed you to elevate your game in school on your academics just a little bit more than what you were willing to do. And 90% of the parents out there are going to be like, well, that's close enough, so I'm going to give it to them. But I don't fold,
Mhm.
man. I don't fold, and
Yeah.
they know. Like, when I tell them, hey,
Yeah.
we'll be at the dinner table, how's school, blah, 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 we're done with dinner. And obviously we don't have phones at the dinner table. Every now and then I may have mine because I got a work call going, or we're doing a
Yeah.
project estimate, right? But they know it's work. Um,
Mhm.
but when I tell them, hey, go get your laptop, let me see your grades, like, they know. I know how quickly they go get their laptop, what I'm about to see, right? And
Yeah.
if it happens to be week 2 of the 12-week semester, sorry, you know?
Yeah. 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 No, that's important, man. Again, that lesson of like, you may think you tried as hard as you could, but guess what? You could have tried harder, right? And sometimes close enough isn't good. It never is good enough, right? That going back to martial arts, right? If you're in a match, if you're competing and it's 0-0, but and I hate the rule system, but if the other guy gets an advantage, then
You and
he's
me
gonna
both.
win. Right.
Right.
Yeah. 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 But that's the unfortunate reality, right? Or even if it goes to like a ref decision or something like that, right? And there's no room for ambiguity, right? You either did it or you didn't. And
Right.
you either won or you lost. There's no in between. And I think getting away from that is what's really causing so much chaos, I think, right now. And it's honestly just so detrimental, especially to kids. So yeah, that's awesome, man. That's
It's unfortunate because sometimes I feel like I'm coaching the coaches too, or the teachers, because
yeah,
I'm very big on, like, I'm checking grades all the time. Right? Like, and they know, like, there better never be a missing assignment not turned in, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I just don't tolerate that. But
Hmm.
when there's things in school or there's things in sports, and I call the school, my son's got, a C and he needs to graduate with a B. And I'll just sit there and tell him, hey, like, don't give him nothing extra, right?
Yeah,
Let him know if he can make it or not. I don't want him to be the 1 out of 30 kids that gets an extra worksheet to take home, right? Or I
yeah,
don't want my daughter to be one of the ones who, gets, 20 minutes extra on her homework from now to the end of the semester. I don't want that
yeah,
for them. I'm not teaching,
mhm,
like, you're not driving home the message that I'm trying to do, right?
yeah,
So those conversations are tough. The kids don't always like the conversations. I just had one with the grandparents the other day. Like, why
mhm,
are you sending the kids $150? Right? Like, I
yeah,
know you're the grandparents. That's great. Save that for Christmas, birthday, holidays.
right,
Like, they have their own money. They need to learn to
yeah.
save their own money, and they need to learn how to use it effectively. And I'm having these conversations, sports, school, internal family members, all the time. And I just wish people could understand, the message that I'm trying to deliver.
Yeah, it's like being, I'm sure at a lot of times you're looked at as the hard ass, but right, you're the one that's willing to take that, right, and say, you know what, call me what you want, but I know in the end the payoff is going to be worth it for them, and they'll, whether you get the thank yous or not doesn't matter, right? Because you'll see it and you'll see that it helped them, and that's thank you enough.
Right. And yeah, I didn't sign up to be a stepdad for a reward system. Right.
Right.
I took that challenge on and promised to love these kids like they're my own. And in the beginning, it was a struggle, especially for my significant other's family, because they were like, man, he's really tough on these kids. And I'm like, I'm really not. If you look at the other ones, they're just on par for the course. But
Yeah.
now the nephews and the cousins love to come over, and we have 2 of them over right now. And they
Yeah.
come over, and I'm like, oh, you guys are bored? Great. Go wash the dog. You do the dishes. You pick the toys up. Like, yeah, we're riding
Yeah.
4-wheelers and we're swimming in the pool. We're going bowling and all that. But, you're also held to the same standard here too. And there's none of that. I'm not eating what you made. I just want McDonald's or whatever. Like, it's not happening here. But the
Yeah.
kids gravitate to it. The kids are going home today and they're like, I wish we could stay for the summer. I'm like, me too,
Yeah.
man. I really do. Because there's
Yeah.
a lot for you to learn here.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, man. So what's your if you could summarize it or synthesize it down to what would be your number one goal as a dad? What is the one thing if nothing else, that you can teach your kids.
You know, people always tell me it's great that I can make money and I can travel the world, take my kids to Hawaii and stuff. And I tell them that's not the goal for me. My goal is how my children view me through their eyes. Right. And I
Mhm.
think that that is my ultimate goal. And when that's the goal, I just think you conduct yourself by a certain level of character, and it's not fake. If it's consistent, it's not fake. And so I want my kids to know that I love them, but I love them through discipline, hard work, and also affection.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. Anything you'd like to share with the audience, with dads out there? Any piece of advice that you learned the hard way, or that you think isn't talked about enough?
I think that what's not talked about enough, especially in today's society, is the discipline factor at home. And because it translates to school, it translates to sports, it translates to the real world. And my number one recommendation for all the dads out there is to be the model of consistency that you wish your children to have.
Mhm. That's beautiful, man. Well, it was a pleasure to have you on here, Mike. It was a great conversation. I think, the discipline piece is so important, and it's something that I am a big advocate of, a big proponent of, and it's something that I try to live by as much as possible. And it's a constant work in progress for me, and I think everyone can approach it that way, right? Of you can always get better, right? And it's always about improvement and making strides towards that. And it's been great, man. I really appreciate it. It's been
Yeah,
fun.
absolutely, brother. For one, I appreciate the time, but also two, I appreciate the platform. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, man.
All right, brother. You take care.
All right, man. Thank you
All
very
right.
much. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Have a good one.
All right. See you.